Hello there, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a big pile of music you're not going to want to listen to, but I'm going to talk to you about it anyway because it's really a fascinating historical moment. And so we're talking about the moment as much as the music. Some of it you may want to listen to, I don't know. What I'm looking at is this box, the Fromm Music Foundation's 20th Century Composers Series. Now, this is a reissue of recordings that were made between about 1956 and 1963 that were supposed to represent a selection of the best, the most important, the most fabulous, the most highly intentioned, sublime, important art music that was going on in the United States mostly, and in other parts of Europe too, around the period in question. Now, the Fromm Music Foundation is a wonderful organization. They put plenty of money into this. It was extremely admirable. It was part of that period when these organizations existed to support the arts and to support music, and they got the brightest and the best people, and they formed committees, and they looked at scores and listened to tapes of things, and they made a very careful selection of the most important and representative music out there, and they promoted recordings on Columbia or Columbia's various labels. The only thing that they didn't take into account was listenability and the possibility that there might be an audience for some of this stuff. The result, of course, was predictable. They got mostly Dreck. And it's the Dreck we're going to talk about, but it's interesting Dreck. It really is. Not all of the music is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm not even suggesting that. In fact, I'm not really even going to judge the music. Well, maybe a little bit, I get to do that. That's part of our job. But the truth is it's your job too. That's what we do. Every time we pick up a recording and put it on, we're judging. We're listening. And in listening, we judge. That's how classics are made, not by being nominated by a panel of eggheads supported by the Fromm Music Foundation. Admirable though they are, like I said, admirable, very, very admirable. And the result is not so much a enjoyable recording listening experience as it is documentation of a particular moment in history. And we can learn from that moment. Those who do not pay attention to history, those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. I don't want to be doomed, do you? Doom is a bad thing. Doom we don't want. We don't want doom. We want to look forward to the future. And so let's take a look at the 10 discs in this fabulous set. And they are, the performances are basically wonderful. And, and there's a lot of music that you've never heard of and probably don't care about. But let's go through it and see what it is. And then we can take it from there. Disc number one, and these are other original jackets. This is beautifully made, this set. It really is. It's Leon Kirchner. Who? Yes, Leon Kirchner, the one and the only Leon Kirchner. You get his trio number one for violin, cello, and piano. That means that there's a trio number two out there somewhere, and maybe a number three, who knows? And also his sonata concertante for violin and piano. Now, he's one of those atonal guys, and don't get me wrong, there's lots of atonal music that I really, really, really like. I do. Whether something's tonal or atonal is completely irrelevant. What matters is whether it's good music, whether it speaks to me, whether it expresses something. The one thing that I think these academic serialists had over a lot of composers today, the Dreck composers today, that is, there's Dreck then and Dreck now. The earlier Dreck, the one thing that they had was that they were still writing in abstract forms. And that means that you were asked to listen to the music as much for its emotional content, that is, as much for its formal content as for its emotional content. Now, the fact that it might not have had much of either is another issue, or that the formal content might have been totally something that's expressed on paper and completely inaudible in performance, well, that's an issue too. But they had that. I think that's important because when you call something programmatic, when you, even if it's a pretentious, ridiculous programmatic name like, Eucalyptus 3 or Aphrodisiac Monumentus, or I don't know. You know what they do today. Everything has to have a name. It all has to have a name, and that name has to be very evocative. And 90% of the time, the music doesn't evoke anything that has anything to do with the name. At least here they were being honest. The trio is a trio. The sonata concertante is a sonata concertante. It's very concertante. And so you know, in a sense, that you're going to be listening to something which is going to create its own form as it goes. And this music is very skillfully composed. No one will ever want to listen to it. It's just not enjoyable to listen to. Now, what does enjoyable mean? You may think it is. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it because it was atonal. I just had a problem with it because it was forgettable. And emotionally, it didn't speak to me. But, that's what happens. Then we got Wilhelm Killmeyer. He died in 2017, 1927 to 2017. His Missa Brevis for chorus a cappella. And Lou Harrison. There we go. Lou Harrison's Mass for mixed chorus, trumpet, harp, and string orchestra. Now that's interesting, isn't it? First of all, there isn't another recording of that, I don't think. Here's the disc. It's with the New York Concert Choir and Orchestra under Margaret Hillis. Remember her? She took over the Chicago Symphony Orchestra chorus under Schulte. Quite a magnificent choral director, an important musical person. So that's nice to have. The Kirchner, by the way, it's nice to talk about who was playing. Nathan Rubin, George Nykrug, Leon Kirchner at the piano, and Eudes Shapiro and Leon Kirchner at the piano. I mean, the composers at the piano. That's really a good thing. You can't say it isn't what they wanted, right? And here we have Margaret Hillis, first class artist. And these are two pieces that I think are worth listening to for choral groups. They really are. And interestingly, of course, while Killmeyer isn't exactly a household word among lovers of serious music, Lou Harrison became one. Why? Because he had a personal style, a genuine personal style that people liked listening to. I mean, people just liked listening to it. It was fascinating. It's marvelous. I've done a Lou Harrison talk. We listened to his ballet, Solstice, and we're going to listen to quite a bit more. He was a true creative genius. And they're not so hard to find. You know one when you hear one, don't you? Next, we have the Juilliard String Quartet. Now, this is in the Juilliard box, too. So, you'd be duplicating Benjamin Lee's String Quartet number 1 and William Denny's String Quartet number 2. These also, they're challenging, but I think eminently listenable and approachable works in the sort of post-Bartokian chromatic way. But, I enjoy string quartet music. If you enjoy string quartet music, you might enjoy taking a bite out of them and seeing where they go. Nothing wrong with that. Then we have the New Music String Quartet. Now that's also in the New Music String Quartet box. Duplication. What can we do? The Jerome Rosen String Quartet number 1 and the Ilhan Uzmanbash String Quartet. Now, Ilhan Uzmanbash is not exactly somebody that we're talking about these days, but nor is Jerome Rosen. Again, challenging, interesting music, I think. And music that we'll probably never listen to again. Why? Because, life is too short. It's such a dog-eat-dog world in the world of music, even in classical music, even with the Fromm Foundation funding you. The fact of the matter is, you got to have the time. You got to want to do it. You got to spend the time listening to it. And then you have to get enough out of it to want to do it again, to want to tell other people about it. See ya, guys. That's where we are. Ernst Krenek, his Sestina for voice and instrumental ensemble with Bethany Beardsley, and the Lamentations of Jeremiah. This is for. Let me get this straight. The first one here. It's easier to see in the book than it is on the disc. Here's the disc. Boop, there's the disc. And then let me take a look at the book here because it's written in like darker print. And let me see. Here we go. It's Bethany Beardsley with the instrumental ensemble conducted by Krenek. And the Lamentations of Jeremiah are the Dresdner Kreuzchor under Martin, I'm trying to see this, Fleming. Yeah, I mean, the Lamentations of Jeremiah has become something of a modern classic in the choral repertoire. It's not a piece that people enjoy very much, but it gets performed. And Krenek, of course, is a major 20th century music character who nobody wants to listen to. So there you go. Although some of his music really is marvelous. It really is. I mean, he was a very good composer. He was tapped to finish Mahler's 10th, but he didn't do it. Instead, he spent more time, fooling around with Mahler's granddaughter. Whatever works. So then we have Ben Weber. Let's see. Or maybe Anna Mahler. Maybe it was with Anna Mahler, Mahler's daughter. Yeah, Mahler's daughter. Yeah, she dated Krenek, not granddaughter. Okay. Ben Weber, the Fantasia variations for piano, for solo piano. And then this is with William Masellos, which he's major pianist. And then we have the Concertino for flute, oboe, clarinet, and string quartet. This is with Julius Baker on flute, Harry Schulman oboe, and Alexander Williams clarinet with the Gallimere string quartet. And wow, is this ugly. Holy moly. I was listening to it. You just want to ream your ear out after you've heard it. It was really unpleasant. And then his Serenade for Strings, which has a march, and then an aria romanza, and a minuet, and a fugato canon, and it ends with another march. And wow, is it ugly too. I don't you love pieces that, it promises to be nice. It promises, but that promise remains resolutely unfulfilled in face of the compositional challenges which the composer set for himself and which I assume he triumphantly surmounts. Ugh. Okay, next. Oh, this is fun. This is Luigi Dallapiccola. Now, all of these pieces are vocal pieces. It's the Sappho fragments, his anachronic, Anacreon poetry from Anacreon, and then 5 songs. And let's see what else we have. The Goethe Lieder and the Concerto for Christmas Eve, 1956 is the title, for soprano and 17 instruments. The text is by what's his name? Jacopo de Todi, Jacopoloni de Todi, whatever his name was, the Todi guy. He's a toady. Anyway, I like Dallapiccola because what's interesting about Dallapiccola is that he really carried on the Italian tradition of principally writing vocal music, but he demonstrated that you could take the wonderful Italian tradition of vocal music and make it sound as ugly as contemporary music from anywhere else. I'm just kidding. Well, somewhat kidding. It's partly kidding. It's fascinating music in a lot of respects, because when you have a text, the words determine what you do. The question is, what's the relationship between the words and the music? Is it interesting? Is it stimulating? Does the music illuminate the words? Do the words illuminate the music? I think with Dallapiccola, the answer is usually yes, even if the idiom's a little difficult. Mostly it's extremely sensitively done. But here's the point. The 5 songs, which are for baritone, 2 flutes, 2 clarinets, harp, piano, viola, and cello, are sung by Frederick Fuller, the baritone, with the instrumental ensemble conducted by Frederick Prosnitz. But all of the other pieces are sung by none other than Elisabeth Söderström, the young Elisabeth Söderström, who is a lovely Kunstdiva at all points in her career. So this is marvelous to hear the young Söderström doing ferociously difficult music. And a bunch of these pieces, the Anacreon thingies, the Anacreon things, and the Goethe Lieder are conducted by Dallapiccola himself, and Prosnitz does the rest. I think that that's a very valuable recording. I really do. Very, very interesting. Next, Elliott Carter, the double concerto for harpsichord and piano with 2 chamber orchestras. And this is with Ralph Kirkpatrick and Charles Rosen, which is, those are the heavy guns, aren't they? They really are. And then there's another Kirchner piece, the Concerto for Violin, Cello, 10 Winds, and Percussion, with Tassy Spivakovsky and Aldo Parasot, conducted by Leon Kirchner. I mean, it doesn't get better than that in terms of instrumentalists. And again, the piece is kind of fun. It's interesting. The Carter was a guy who it made sense to bet on. The Fromm Foundation got it right with Carter because, first of all, he wrote some absolutely fabulous music. He really did. He was a major guy by any stretch of the imagination, even if a lot of his music's impossibly difficult to listen to. Some of it really is splendid. So they were not betting on the wrong horse in this particular race. Also, Charles Rosen wrote a wonderful extended essay on Elliott Carter's music and learning how to play this particular piece and coming to understand what Carter was doing in music that had never been done before by anybody else. And the essay makes terrific reading because it's by Charles Rosen, who was gifted at everything he touched, who was absolutely a genius as a performer, as a thinker, as an everything. I mean, he was one of those guys who always wanted to be the smartest guy in the room, except that he usually was the smartest guy in the room. But the thing that's so interesting, I think, about this particular essay is that you come away from it totally impressed with what Elliott Carter was going to do and realizing that it just doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference. Why? Because what you learn from Rosen's unbelievably articulate and powerful and persuasive essay is that if you are a musical genius and a brilliant human being who has spent most of their lives learning to play an instrument and then worked intensively with the composer and spent another good irredeemable chunk of your life learning to play an impossibly difficult new piece of music, and to the point where you understand it as if you yourself had written it and can explain exactly what that is to everybody else, it still doesn't make any difference. I'm serious. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because what matters isn't how sophisticated or whether he's doing something. Let me put it to you this way. If you go to a restaurant and it's run by an absolutely famous chef, Michelin 4 stars, and you order his absolute specialty and you hate it and you think it's disgusting, are you going to eat it? Do you have to eat it? Are you going to force yourself to eat it? I mean, if it makes you want to barf, are you going to eat it anyway? No! It's the chef's job to please you. You're the customer. We are the customers. It is Elliott Carter's job to please us. If he could convince a large portion of the performing arts musical industrial complex that had money that his music was worth subsidizing, and many of us were suffered ourselves to listen to it, more power to him. Good for him. And frankly, I think there is music he wrote that is definitely worth listening to, that's worth making the effort for. But how many people are going to spend the time doing it? Even people who really love music. It's a legitimate question. It's just a legitimate question. And how should the funding be obtained to support playing and making us endure that kind of music? The question is, either it will exist or it won't exist. It will exist because we tolerate it. We pay for it. We either pay for it directly by going to hear it and buying a ticket, or we pay for it indirectly with our tax dollars and with our subsidies and by the government or a rich person or somebody. We're all paying for it. And the real issue is how long we feel like paying for it. That will determine whether it lives or dies. And some people are very upset with that. Some people think economics should not play a role in this, that it should only be a question of artistic quality. And that's bullshit. Total, complete, utter bullshit. Economics should always play a role because, folks, as I say time and time again, this is just entertainment. That's all it is. It's entertainment, and we have many ways to spend our entertainment dollars. And if it's going to be this and not that, then this has to be more attractive than that. And if it isn't, it will vanish. And that's the way it should be. That's exactly the way it should be. Because our culture and our enjoyment and our musical, however high and mighty it is the sum total of that which we choose to enjoy. And we have every right to choose to enjoy what we wish. So that's all I have to say about Elliott Carter. Oh, and there's the piano sonata with Charles Rosen, a fabulous performance. It's also in the Charles Rosen box. Right. Okay, Lucas Foss. Now, Lucas Foss is a fascinating composer. I like Lucas Foss. I mean, have you heard his symphonies on the Boston Modern Orchestra Project? I may do a talk on those, and I'll see if I can get some examples. They are really good. I mean, they're really, really good. And here we have Time Cycle, one of his famous pieces in the version for soprano and chamber orchestra. Let's see, who's the soprano? It's Grace Lynn Martin. Lucas Foss is one of the performers. And then we have his Echo for four soloists, the group for contemporary music. It's with Charles Warrenen as one of the pianists. Whoa! Raymond de Roche. Charles Warrenen is another composer of music nobody wants to listen to. And we get Arthur Bloom and Robert Martin. Here's the cover on that one. And Lucas Foss is always worth listening to. He's a fascinating voice in contemporary music. He died, in 2009. Really interesting. And finally, as a bonus, we get Leon Fleischer playing Copland's Piano Sonata and the Roger Sessions from My Diary. Leon Kirchner's Piano Sonata No. 1. A lot of Kirchner. And a couple little pieces, 3 barcarolles by Ned Rorem. This, of course, is in the Fleischer box. But, it's okay. The point is, that's it. That is the sum total of that which is contained in the 20th Century Composer Series funded by the Fromm Music Foundation. Whether you want this or not is really entirely up to you. If you've got the time and want to make the effort, then that's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. I would never criticize. What I criticize is anyone suggesting that you have an obligation to do that, because music is many things, but an obligation it should never be. Never, ever, ever. It should only be a joy. And if your joy is supporting contemporary composers and contemporary music, then knock yourself out. That's your joy. That's where you get it. The interesting thing about, I think, this set now is that it's no longer contemporary. I mean, most of this stuff is some of it's going on a century, and a lot of it is half a century or more years old. So then we come to the question of what is contemporary music and what are we supporting? Do you want to support non-contemporary, difficult, unlistenable, or not pleasant to listen to music? That's the question this is asking. How much of this stuff was the right pick? I think some of it was. I think Elliott Carter. I think Lucas Foss. I think maybe a couple pieces by Kirchner. I mean, definitely Lou Harrison. There's some good picks in here. Krenek. There was great music being written back then, as there is now, as there was at all times. Sifting through it is part of the fun. And that, to me, is a reason to give this some consideration, if you feel like it, if you have the time. It's challenging, but it's also entertaining. And that is what I'm trying to say. As long as it's entertaining, we're in good shape. So keep on listening, folks. Here's one that'll really get you hopping. Take care. Bye-bye.